It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast, your real estate knowledge bank right across Australia, and talking about your real estate property from literally everywhere, 7 days a week. And you can stream us on multiple platforms. It is the middle of our working week, a Wednesday, May the 28th. And good morning to Olivia and Steve in Canberra. Thank you so much for taking the time to email us. You say that you've been listeners for the last 12 months. Your property journey story is a unique one. You got back, you say, about a year ago after travelling around Europe for 2 years and found each other while working in a bar in London. You hatched a plan, you say, to save as much euro money so that you could put it towards a house to start a family. You thought that you had 2 years of savings left until something happened. Steve won lotto. No, not quite, but almost. Steve's auntie gifted you $100,000 to get you into your property now. And that is such a great positive energy story. Why don't we hear more stories like that from relatives who help out first home buyers if they've got the money to do so? I'll bet you anything that Steve's auntie, when you have that house warming, will probably have the biggest smile across her face. I mean, this type of gifting seems to be the exception these days because holding on to your money and having it multiply rather than helping somebody, it just seems to be a lost form of generosity within extended families. So if you are an uncle or an auntie or a grandfather or a granny, do it if you can afford to help out first home buyers within your family. It's going to give you untold pleasure seeing that home grow, knowing that you had a hand in it. So good luck to you, Olivia and Steve in Canberra. Let us know how that all shakes out. And if you have got a real estate positive story or otherwise, you can send that through our email address is myrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. Well, right now, let's go to Queensland and catch up with Monique Bell, and she is waiting for us in Atherton. Good morning, Monique. Welcome to the Real Estate Breakfast. First question I've got to ask you is, where is Atherton?
Good morning, Craig. So Atherton is one sometimes people haven't heard of, but it's definitely one to put on the list to visit. Atherton is about 1 and a bit hours out of Cairns. So think lush green, think fresh produce, a lot more space, lots of agriculture going on up here, and a bit cooler climate than you see in Cairns.
Ah, right. Okay. And what's the population these days in Atherton?
So we're just under 10,000 here in Atherton.
And do you know off the top of your head what the median prices are? I can pull it up if you don't, but that'd be interesting just to get a lay of the land for houses and units.
The property market here, I think in the last 7 years, we've seen it increase by about 57%. The prices are still a lot cheaper than what you get obviously in your capital cities. Even we're slightly cheaper than Cairns, but up here you get a lot bigger land. Also prime spot for growing. Medium rental price is minimum's about $4.90 per week. So still quite an affordable place to live.
Now, you work in the mortgage space, and that story about Olivia and Steve there in Canberra, you would have no doubt had the parents contributing, but not so much in the wider family.
Yeah, look, I guess it's more typical that the parents are assisting, but it's great when you can have any sort of relative be able to help you and get you in that property market. And sometimes isn't necessarily putting the money towards a house deposit, but it might be just some money to help close existing loans, to help increase borrowing capacity. There's lots of different ways that I guess cash can assist you in your borrowing.
Yeah, that auntie, she's probably thought to herself, well, hang on, let's just look at the dollars and cents here. If they're not getting into their property for another 2 years, the market is going to move. It gets away on people, doesn't it? And what a gift to be able to say, look, don't pay those property prices in 2 years' time. Pay the price now, save the money, and you're in.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the increase in pricing, every time the RBA drops the rate, there's normally increase in pricing, increase in demand. So be able to have that cash to get in now when, they are predicting more RBA cash movements. It's a smart idea.
Yeah, I just love that story. It's so positive, and it's the way to think if you've got the money, rather than, just hogging all of that money to yourself when you can help somebody. Now, the regional area where you live, it does bring in regional borrowing. Now, I don't think we've ever talked about that. If you're in a regional area, there are different regional borrowing requirements. So can you talk to that there in Atherton and what is specific to your market?
Yeah, well, something I guess quite interesting that a lot of people don't know is that each different bank or lender, they have different policies in terms of postcode and where they're lending to. So when you get into more regional areas, sometimes it means that some lenders actually won't lend money to specific postcodes because it's classed as too regional for them. Maybe it's too risky. So when you're lending, it's something that you always need to consider when you're going to a bank is, can they actually lend to my area?
All right, we are talking to Monique there in Atherton in Far North Queensland. We'll come back in just a moment and we'll ask about bigger blocks and lending challenges. We'll ask that after this.
Explore new property destinations where you could live with exclusive interviews covering real estate news and market insights.
Well, the ABC drew an interesting comparison saying that house prices are once again on the rise, which is mirroring what happened in the early 2000s. Back then, the RBA, they say, cut interest rates without a recession, and we're seeing that play out once again. And then you add in returning first home buyer grants, ongoing capital gains tax discounts, and a fresh immigration surge, and we're looking at a familiar recipe: high demand, low supply, and rising prices. And history isn't just rhyming, it's repeating, with affordability improving but accessibility worsening fast. And then you look at the homeless situation, which has a greater number attached to people out on the street in greater numbers than in the 2000s.
Ready to take your real estate knowledge to the next level? So are we.
And it is a Real Estate Wednesday. We are in Atherton talking to Monique, and I want to ask you about these bigger blocks and whether or not there are lending challenges, Monique, as a result of that.
Obviously, when you get more rural, you normally get much bigger land. And with that also comes its own challenges. Again, can be seen as more risky lending to the bank. So sometimes it means that you do require a larger deposit depending on the land size. Again, each lender varies in what they require. Some require it to be connected to power, have sewerage, have road access. These are things that are good questions when you're looking to borrow to purchase something in a more regional area or something that is a bigger land size that you're always going to a lender that you know can obviously accept these different requirements. Something else I always recommend to my clients is asking the question upfront to the real estate, can this be built on? What permits do you need to build on this block of land? The tricky regional, lands that we find is where it might not be quite classed as residential because it's so big, but then it can't be classed as commercial because no commercial activity will be able to be done on that piece of land. Making sure that you really understand what you're purchasing and if it can be actually classed as residential is really important before obviously you get too deep into the contract.
And what about the different borrowers that you're seeing in your market?
Yeah, well, definitely we see a lot of obviously people after bigger land sizes. They, wanting to move out of the capital cities after COVID, and they're wanting to purchase something big that maybe the kids can run around on. Definitely seeing a lot more in that space. And something else that is recently coming through more and more is rent vestors, which is quite interesting. It's where people are deciding to continue on renting and purchase an investment rather than purchasing an owner-occupied property. And that comes again with just the price of living, I guess, and how much it is to actually purchase a home. So instead, they're choosing to continue to rent, especially, I guess, if they're living in the larger cities.
Yeah, so just with regard to rent vesting, how far and wide are they coming from in terms of inquiries?
I'm seeing them from all over the place. We're lucky here where we are in Atherton with quite reasonable rent prices. So, averaging, around that 500 mark per week. So it's still really reasonable to rent. So that's why a lot of people are choosing to continue to rent and actually buy something that they can in return rent out, probably in a bigger city like Cairns, where they're seeing the rent return being a lot more.
And you were talking about these block sizes. How big are the blocks there in Atherton?
Oh, we get a range of block sizes. Anywhere from your 1 acre all the way up to 100 acres. Something else, I guess, important to note is when you are sort of shopping around for larger blocks, obviously, if something's built on it, that is ideal. If it's vacant land, then it gets a little bit tricky when we talk about any land over that 50 hectare mark and it's vacant. It does get a little bit tricky.
All right, well, let's have a look at these median house prices. Median snapshot for houses in Atherton, 480,000. That is up 3.2% over the last 12 months. Rental yield 4.9%, and those unit prices 389,000. Boy, that is interesting, eh? 29.2% rise in the last 12 months. So plenty of movement on those units.
Yeah, there's lots that has been happening in Atherton. Units especially quite sought after because there's not a lot up here, but with the prices, it's, ideal for first home buyers to get their foot in the market.
All right, well, thank you so much for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast, Monique. Enjoy your Wednesday up there in Atherton. And for somebody who was a little bit nervous coming on, you did so well.
Thanks, Craig. Thank you so much for having me.
Each week, we bring you in-depth real estate discussions, including inspiring stories from homeowners, knowledgeable real estate professionals and economists. Whether you're a buyer, seller, or just a real estate enthusiast, we are your ultimate property podcast.
We had another development in Adelaide where we wanted to cut off a backyard and build a second dwelling, and we were told by the council that we couldn't do it because we would end up with a 5% undersized block on one of the blocks. Well, we took them to the Land and Environment Court, and they backed off and let us do the development. So a lot of people, as you say, will give up very quickly and just go according to the letter of the law.
That is really great advice. And in terms of a precedent, for those people that are listening going, gee, where do I go? Where do I go for that? Where do they go, Margaret, when you're looking for that information? Because it is very, very useful to support your argument.
You need good people on your team. And I had a really good surveyor. So when we were first knocked back on what we wanted to do, you need to fight this. And he wanted to do that for me because he said it's just not right. You shouldn't have had this knocked back, really, even though it's outside policy.
Yeah, good news is most of the lenders have passed the rate cuts on. They did that almost immediately. There are some lenders, smaller lenders, some of the lenders who might have been running some lower rates over the last month or so that haven't cut their rates. So keep an eye out on that. They tend to be the smaller banks, community banks, building societies. Take a look at them, ask them what they're doing, but most of the providers have passed those rate cuts on.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.